Today we're going to be discussing movement medicine. Just to kick us off, the idea of movement medicine, when you hear that, what do you think? What comes to mind? What are some of the tools that you think are important on a personal level that you could use to attain a sense of wellness through movement? I'll start with you, Chido.
Well, when we talk of movement and medicine, I think of my father. So my father was a stern man, very difficult to talk to. But if you went for a walk, if you went for a run, it was in that moment that you could approach him and say, Daddy, do you know that this is happening in my life? It was, I think at that moment, he was able to take time, maybe remove himself a little bit from that stern, I'm the father, you don't talk to me in a certain way. And immediately you were able to, in that moment when you're either taking a break from your run, because we used to do karate as well with my father. So it was a moment where I found that I could communicate. So in my life, I just find that movement is a place for me where I can think, have introspection, and communicate well.
That's a very nice story, actually. I'm like, wow, that's also quite powerful, because I think, with Muti also focusing a lot on culture. That's something that's very dominant within the local context, is this idea of not being able to communicate and having all this build up, which then leads to a lot of issues with mental health, not having the capacity to actually communicate. So it's interesting that you're connecting movement with communication and how it facilitates.
Totally.
Interesting. And what about you, Carmen? When you think of movement medicine, what comes to mind?
So, movement has been a part of my life since I was 2.5 years old. I think I started dancing before I started walking. And having grown up a dancer in all kinds of disciplines like ballet, contemporary, jazz, modern, tap, ballroom, Latin, just the whole spectrum, it was actually only when I left university, I think that was 2010, that I completely cut movement out of my life. And though it was something, I had it in my mind that, dance would be the rest of my life, and that was my calling. And then having moved to university and having let go of that movement was actually when I realized that movement was actually my medicine. Because this is when the first time in my life I completely had a disconnect from my body, from myself, from my identity. And I went through a whole couple of years of depression, of anxiety, of anorexia, of a whole lot of things. And you think, if I stop exercising, then this is how I gain weight, or this is how, as a dancer's mindset, I was still in that space where I connected movement in that kind of way. And also from an artistic perspective of, I need this as an expression. So I think that because I also grew up with a very closed throat chakra, and that is still something that I'm working through. So even being here on a panel, as soon as you said to me, well, lights, camera, action, I was like, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go, but let's see. So yeah, movement was definitely, I realized, a form of expression, and just allowing the body to take care of the things that you couldn't express or you couldn't let go of through other forms. And that was what was most familiar to me. So that's when yoga stepped into my life, and that's when I really started seeing the mirror within as opposed to without. As a dancer, you constantly have this mirror in front, so you're constantly comparing yourself to yourself. There's a constant state of this comparison, and I think that can also be quite, I wouldn't say that's healing in any form. Your body awareness is very much outside of you, because it's what do you look like versus how do I feel, right? So you're stepping away from your body, you're stepping away from the medicine and the language that's lodged deep within your tissues. And so that's why in yoga you constantly talk about remembering and coming home, because the medicine is literally within you, and the way that you move your body. I always say that coming into different asana, you inviting different frequencies into your cells to express. So as that energy flows through you, different things are brought out of you, different things are remembered. And you also allowing your body to facilitate that letting go, which, in this society was so much about instant gratification, and I need more, I need more, I need more, I'm not satisfied with what I have. And so we keep filling our cups as opposed to saying, I need to actually let go of something to get newness into my life. So yeah, I think movement medicine for me is really the understanding through yoga that there's an element of coming back to the self, of remembering, of letting your body, of playing your body as an instrument to express the secrets that are held within you.
Yeah. That just brought home to me, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, he says that natural forces within us, that is where you find healing. So that's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying, that the natural forces within us is where we find our healing.
Definitely.
That's beautiful.
And I think that just the remembering, and a lot of the medicine is in the awareness, and the awareness and the remembering of coming back home, and the awareness of what do I store in my body that I don't necessarily need my mind and my brain to uncover, but actually coming back to what we've all so much forgotten about is the heart brain. We emanate, that's who we are at our core, right? It's love, that's our highest frequency, and so much wisdom that is so bio-individual resides in this magnetic force that, travels way beyond any of the other bodies that we are.
That brings something to mind. Just what you're saying, and I'm just thinking about Paula and all the work that she does using dance with a variety of young people in very difficult situations with dance at the core. I don't know, Paula, if you want to just get into that a little bit as well and just tell us, with your work and putting together movement with children with disabilities or with refugees, and that, dealing with those very difficult situations and movement together, how that has actually helped, or what has come out of that experience, speaking about from what you just said, Carmen, about, finding your way back after having, gone through such a break that was sort like it was tumultuous, but you found a way to come back home. So I don't know if Paula, you can just jump in there and tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, sure. I think movement through dance is something very powerful, and if it was up to me, I would actually put it in every school curriculum, because there's a lot of tools that you learn in terms of healing with the body. So specifically in my case, with dealing with disabled children and vulnerable groups, is that you find movement is a way of a lot of like dealing with mental illness specifically. And even for myself, when I first engaged with the disabled group, I was very challenged myself, because I was trying to interpret what does the definition of disabled actually mean? Because when it came to movement, the disabled children could move their bodies, they just moved it in a different way. But for example, if I'm not very good at maths, or I'm not very good in something, I wouldn't call myself disabled. I would just say that I'm not good at doing X, Y, Z. And particularly with the disabled group, my notions around what does it mean to be disabled was challenged, because yes, they couldn't move their body in a certain way, but that didn't mean that they weren't able bodies. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, so basically I was just challenged myself with the notion of what does it mean to be disabled, because disabled essentially means that you are ill, in the context of you're not able to do something or you're limited. But actually my whole notions of that was challenged. And even in the refugee context, is that we often deal with very traumatic stories that we retell through movement. And And that was a very difficult situation because you specifically in the European context where you deal with refugees that have this notion of like, oh, we're the victims, we're treated like the outcast of the society. And when we get into the space of dance, it's like now they get to heal through their way of understanding what it means to heal. So yes, it's a very broad context of what I'm looking at, but healing is of course at the core, but healing comes in different forms, and healing doesn't just mean that it's sick and you're not sick.
I love what you said about healing, that it's not just healing from what you think is wrong or something, but like the first discussion we had, we were saying that healing is in different forms. Sometimes you bump into it, and then sometimes it just so happens. So I love what you're just saying, that, you know, there's healing in different aspects, in different forms, and it's not just about healing from something that's just there.
Yes, and also, sorry, I forgot to mention the psychological aspect. You find that a lot of your so-called illness or limitations has a lot to do with actually the way that you think, or your psychology. And there's a lot of like barriers mentally, but once you get into the dance space, those barriers start to eliminate. But the interesting thing is that once you step out of the studio, all the barriers come back, all the insecurities, all the fears, all the anxiety, all the anxiousness returns, which is a very interesting concept, that when you're in the dance studio, those things begin to dissolve. People work through their trauma through body movement, through rhythm, through releasing of energies, through telling their stories in a way that's artistic and makes them feel dignified. And when they step out of there, they become the victims, the put my head down, walk around with shame over me, which is a very interesting concept.
I think for me, when it comes to mental health and dance and music and an expression of arts, I believe that, okay, for me, I think the mind is just like anything that you can play around with. It's just that you need certain tools that can help you to fix your mind, to change your mindset, how you're thinking. Because like you just said, dance does affect how we move. Dance affects our feelings. It affects how we move. And then it's also the same way. It affects our mind affects how we're going to move, how our day's going to go, how our thinking is going. So I always believe that when you actually try to deal with the mind, try focus on something, and if you allow dance to actually make you transcend into another whole dimension, it becomes different. You're changing your mindset. So like you're saying, then most people then carry out their problems. Like you're in the dance studio, you're going to dance, and then a few minutes later you're out, and then everything comes back again. You're now being weighed down. That is very true. And I have noticed it. It actually happens. It's even happened to me a couple of times. But then I think it's more about now making it into something that you do daily, that becomes something you're conscious about. I think that's when we can actually say movement can actually contribute to changing your mind, and then just having a whole new mindset. Like if okay, I'm a Christian. So I'm just thinking of there's this verse that says renew your mind every day. So it is something that you should consciously do every day, because it acknowledges the fact that your mind will be weighed down as we go through the days. You will have stress. Stress has always been there from time, and all these other things that we talk about, depression, we talk about all these different diseases, they come from a place that's inside going out. And so I believe if you attack the mind and we make these movements, we make dance, and we make, even when we're just walking, even when we're just picking up a glass of water, if it becomes something we're intentionally thinking about and processing those things, like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and absorbing the energies that are around, or just trying to do some form of release of what we have, it eventually becomes something that we're doing every day, that we can change our mindset every day, constantly renewing it. Yeah.
Yes, most definitely. And yes, and therefore it was a very interesting experiment, specifically even in the case of the disabled children, is that when we were in the studio, the way they would move their body, you'd forget that they were actually disabled. Wow. And then when the dance class ends, you begin to see them going back, because their muscles has been developed in a way that, especially in Africa, where there's not so much funding for disabled orphans and so forth, which is what I was working with. there's this issue of like, yes, maybe you're born with your legs contorted in a certain way. And then because you don't have what we call movement therapy or any of that, you kind of get in the routine of this is the way that you walk. But if you actually had someone which worked through with you, you know, dealing with the psychological aspect plus with the physical, I think that person could have a better form of life or quality of life. And I feel dancing is one of those tools which basically assists with that.
I'm going to jump into something you've just mentioned, Paula, and you spoke about, you know, the psychology of it all. And I think maybe Precious, you can speak to that a little bit, because I know when it comes to what most people think bodybuilding is, which is like really intense, like hardcore, go for it, like mental battle situation. But, you know, you find peace in that space. Whereas on the outside, you look at it and think, my gosh, you must be so stressed out. So maybe just also speaking about the psychology of movement and how it actually works, not in the way that people probably assume, especially in a space like bodybuilding.
Yeah, in a space of bodybuilding, let me not call it bodybuilding because people get intimidated when they hear bodybuilding. They think you have to be a certain size and you have to have certain muscle sizes, but it's not about that. It's to me personally, I do it because it brings me balance. When I say balance, the things that I go through for me to make a bodybuilding contest, let me say fitness modeling, that's what I like to call it. Things that you go through, the discipline to know that I'm at the season where I'm supposed to be, say, lifting heavy. And after this, I'm supposed to eat this. I can't miss my meal because it's timed. And sometimes you actually carry your meals with you. No matter where you are, it's 3 o'clock, you have to eat and you must stop and eat. That discipline alone to say, okay, I know I'm in this. The moment you just say, I'm going to compete, it's like your day is timed. 5 a.m., I'm out, I'm running. 7 o'clock, I'm back, I have to be weight training. 10 o'clock, I have to be eating. Throughout the day, you calculate your days, and that discipline alone to know you're going to be doing this for the 6 weeks or for the 12 weeks. And to me, in life, I think it will help me to deal with situations outside bodybuilding, to deal with issues like stress, like you face certain things in life, but if you can just go through that bodybuilding preparation, when you face hardships, there's like a way you can deal with it. It's different from someone who just doesn't train or hasn't gone through that timing and consistency of what you need to do to go through a competition. So when I face difficulties, I just feel like somehow I can't do this. This is nothing. So to me, I think it's the balance.
It's interesting that you speak about, you know, how to manage life outside of, you know, if you're looking at movement medicine as a mirror for the way that you approach life, the same as when you get onto the mat. It's the same thing, you know, yoga is one discipline of movement, healing practice that is very much about mirroring how I manage my own life through, right? So every asana is not for the physicality. Well, of course, it's healing as you move, but it's not so much about what it looks like on the outside, like a performance. It's not a performance. It's about how do I feel into my body, right? And so every asana, as we call it in yoga, is postures. So every asana is meant to be there to make you feel in a certain way, to simulate a kind of emotion. So if I'm in down dog and I'm engaging and I'm feeling like, you know, how much longer can I stay here, right? Versus another posture that I feel like I can fully surrender into. So you're getting all these different textures and frequencies from of emotion that when I'm on the mat and I use my breath and anchor into my breath and say, how do I still tap back into my parasympathetic nervous system by slowing my breath down? Even if my body is under challenge, I know that it's a simulation and it's not actually, I'm not threatened, right? So it's always threat, it's always a perception in life. And so when you can anchor into your body and your body becomes your guide and you can say, well, okay, I'm feeling like this is a huge challenge, but I can move through this, through my breath. I can still stay in a calm state of mind. So as you were saying about different emotion, it's that state of how do I anchor into my body to manage fluctuating emotions that can appear off the mat.
Yes.
The more frequency, it's like building the muscle of the mind, right?
Yeah.
When I build the muscle of the mind on my mat through these various experiences of movements and of emotion, I can learn to deal with that in the mirror outside of life. Outside of the mat.
Yeah, definitely. You know, when you face challenges, I would say I love the challenge of weightlifting. So if I'm faced with like something that I feel like this is so, how am I going to go through this? I want to go into the gym. I want to lift the hardest weight that I can. I want to jump as high as I can. And when I'm done with that, I feel like, oh, okay, I conquered that. I can do this. I can do this. Bring it on. You know, bring it on. I can do it. And I think we've had clients that Precious is training them, and you seem to be going to a certain goal together. And then at some point, this person, they start pulling back. And you wonder, what's the problem? What's the matter? And when you just take a step back and talk to them, you find that, oh, okay, maybe they want more support. But if you don't get to that point where you understand that certain ways of movement, like some people like walking, some people like running, some people like lifting weights. So I think it's within the different ways of working out that people find their way, you know, like their path of how to deal with certain things. Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted to say something, sorry.
Just listen to this inhale that we all do.
Okay. It just, what you've said has now like sparked a different chain of thought in my brain. When we look at movement, indigenous movement, and I'm not just speaking about African indigenous movement, I'm speaking about any, you know, ethnic groups, indigenous movement, and how it looks very different. And to go back to what you were saying about, you know, some people like running or lifting or yoga, but even within those indigenous movements, some people like the Maasai will jump. You know, here in Zimbabwe, our if you look at Jerusalem, we, you know, twerk, right? But you know, with Vimbuza, which we're going to be focusing a lot on as well, it has more to do with masquerade type movement. So exerting energy. It all looks different, and it could, you know, look hard for someone else, but be very healing for somebody who's, you know, in the practice of it. And I think sometimes when it comes to movement, we immediately, I know a lot of people from the feedback we've received have gone immediately to dance as, you know, the only form of movement for healing. But hearing all of you speak, you know, is kind of proving the thought behind this process, which is there are different ways of expressing movement, but it's not technique based, and it's not practice, like it's not a specific practice that brings about that medicine or that healing. But you can move even something as simple as what you mentioned before, Carmen, you know, on a vibrational level, you know, more of an energy space within sound. It doesn't have to be like overly exaggerated.
And it doesn't have to be competitive, you know. I faced a lot of clients that think, you know, when you're training, you have to be to beat someone, you have to be better than someone. look at that one, look at that one. But no, it's always about you and your journey. They must understand it's a journey. And if you understand that it's a journey, you can always take small steps, and then you can always progress from there, which a lot of people do not understand, but something to learn, just to make small steps at a personal level.
And I think what everyone's touched on is just the fact that regardless of what form of or modality of movement it is, it's about getting out of the mind. Because in the society, this, we're so ego driven. And because of this, we're so comparative. Or we compare each other to ourselves, to others, to, everything is about comparison. That's just a trend in this day and age. And to actually get out of the mind and back into the body, because as I think Paula was just saying, there's so much disease that comes from the external or the more subtle levels of the body, right? So the body, the physical body, is the last manifestation of disease. So if you're looking at, your spirit body and then your emotional, your mental, we are always perceiving our reality outside of us. So if ever we experiencing stress, it's because something has triggered that. So that's a perception of my own, right? And if I have not digested that on a mental or emotional, spiritual level, that is literally coming down to the source of my body, which is something that hasn't been digested, right? So again, it's coming out of the mind and actually saying, body, like, facilitate me, like, let me digest what I've had, all my experiences of today. Let me digest this, this compressive feeling of stress or anxiety, or it all comes down to the same thing. It's get out of the mind and into the body. Let your body support your healing. Let your body digest these builds up of emotion.
If I can maybe prompt Nonga to just, from a clinical perspective of what you just mentioned, Carmen, how that manifests with, the spaces that she's been working in. Because, she's been applying meditation and movement for mental health as well. So I don't know, Nonga, if you can just come in on that as well and just give us a bit of your perspective and your experiences.
Thank you very much. I love hearing what everybody else has said, and the fact that you keep on repeating, exercise, movement, meditation, working out, finding a balance. As a clinical counselor, we tend to, especially people who are suffering with depression and anxiety and stress, working on stress management. One of the first things I always put on a treatment plan is exercise, moving your body, finding that balance within yourself, finding a space where you can focus entirely on you. And when you're exercising, your focus is 100% on you. It's the way you move, it's the way you're moving your hands, it's your body posture, So being able to ground yourself through and through with exercise or meditation, that is one of the greatest things that you can do for your body. I will talk about my own personal experience as well as what I've actually given out. There are people who struggle with mental health issues or addictions. And, we've got a lot of that. We're living in Africa, it's an international problem. But you find that people who tend to work out more, and focus on their body and focus on removing toxins from their body, it naturally produces a happy endorphin, which helps regulate your brain and helps heal your brain, helps heal your mind. It improves your mental ability to remember things better. It improves your ability for your body to fix itself when it's been hurt, and when you look at being hurt, doesn't always mean in the mind. You're also looking at your body in general. So if you're not well, if your immune system is incapacitated, we always say move, because if you stay in bed and sleep the whole day, so most of the time it actually gets worse. So you don't move, try and get up, try and sit in the sun, try and meditate to be able to help your mind fight. My greatest term is, there's no mental health without physical health. or there's no good health without mental health, because the brain connects to the body. If the body is not okay, then the mind is not going to be okay. So through movement, that's where we're actually focusing on the body more. You know? So that's what I can share for now.
Thank you, Nunga.
I can just jump in on, I love what you touched on a hormonal level. And if you're looking at, as we were talking about endorphins and everything in the work that I do from an integrated nutrition health coaching perspective, as well as yoga, I've got a theme that runs through the teachings that I share, and that's all to do with sustainable serotonin, as I call it, or sustainable happiness. So everything returning to that bliss body that we naturally are. And again, it's all coming back to remembrance. But on a hormonal level, when happiness or when anxiety manifests in the body, you know, you've got through our daily lives, we've got this influx of stress, of cortisol, of adrenaline that's building up, and that gets lodged in our tissues. So that is a memory that the body can store as well. It's that, you know, we're wiring up our nervous system, and our nervous system is responding based on memories that we've had prior in the past versus what is actually happening now. So that is all lodged within our tissues. And when you're actually moving in whatever form it may be, you're actually creating those, you know, that concoction of serotonin, of endorphins, of dopamine, of oxytocin, and that whole cocktail actually has the capacity to flush out on a physical level those cortisol hormones that are lodged in our fascia, in our less flexible connective tissue or less flexible muscle. So again, just from that hormonal perspective, all kind of movement becomes medicine because we have the capacity to actually reverse the process of stress and anxiety.
I'm actually glad you brought up your sustainable serotonin, because I was going to, you know, ask you to actually share with us, you know, why it's important and what, you know, like, were you discovering, you know, that this is what you are, you know, working towards, or, you know, trying to attain or want other people to achieve for themselves? You know, why is it so important in as simple as simple explanation as possible for those who don't have an experience of anything beyond just I'm stressed and I need something to help me to de-stress?
Well, I'll try and be as simple as possible. Symptomology. But as I mentioned, you know, sustainable serotonin, the serotonin rising is really what I stand for, and it's come from my own personal experience with life. As I mentioned to you before, after dancing, I went into a little bit of a dark space, but through that came a lot of light. And I devoted myself over 10 years ago now to the question of how can I return to happiness? How can I be happy? I mean, that simple question, you ask so many people in this day and age, are you happy? And you won't get an immediate yes. You know, it's always like, I am, that this happened and that happened. And, you know, so it's that remembrance of how do I find that bliss body of who I am? Because naturally, if you're looking at yourself from an energetic perspective, we're almost these onion layers of being, right? So our physical, our mental, our emotional, our spiritual, our Atman, which is our absolute in Sanskrit, you know, your absolute highest self that you can meet. And so the bliss body, that frequency, is who we are at our core. That's who we all are, you know, not discriminating. And so, as you were saying, you know, that's sustainable serotonin or sustainable bliss. Serotonin, for anyone that doesn't know, is the bliss molecule. So if you're looking at all the different hormones, you've got dopamine, which is the reward, oxytocin, which is love, serotonin, which is just pure bliss. And how do I bring myself back into a state that I'm just happy and whole from as a baseline? You know, how do I raise my baseline happiness? Not because something happened to me, not because I went to the gym and I feel better, not because these are all just triggers to bring me back, right? Because it's building a memory. The more I get onto my mat, the more I feel happiness, the more I'll naturally raise my baseline. Right, so happiness, as I say, is not just, okay, I'm feeling super happy today, but how is my holistic body happy? Because when I'm in happiness, when my body is happy, it's balanced, right? then on a physical level, I'm in health. On a mental level, I raise my baseline health. On an emotional level, I manage those fluctuating emotions because I can anchor myself in the core of who I am. I think that answers your question.
Totally. You know, I think let me start by saying I am happy. I must be made of serotonin, you know, endorphins everywhere. Yeah, but I feel like what you're saying is totally true. Before we heal anything, before we even start to say I'm exercising because of that, you personally have to be in a space where you love and accept yourself. So you find that a lot of people say, I want to work out because I want to lose weight. And for me, that's a wrong approach. I want to work out because I want to be well. I want to be healthy. I want to live long. I want to work out because I broke up with my husband and I want to, they actually used to be a show, Revenge Body. Chloe, it didn't make sense to me. Before you think about taking revenge on someone, love yourself. Stand up and say, you know what? I'm sorry you lost this. You know? And then you can work on anything else. Whatever you're going to be doing it for yourself. But from a place of self-love, self-worth. I want to be here for the long haul. You know? That's how I feel. Accepting yourself, loving yourself first before you even talk about, I want to lose weight because I want to make him see that he lost. No, he must see that he lost something. Whether you're 150 pounds or you're 100 pounds, he must just see that he lost something.
I wanted to say there are people that choose to start moving to heal, but then they keep taking themselves back into their zone where they're down. How are they doing it? They sort of go to a yoga studio. You want to join, you want to use yoga to heal, but then she's telling you what to do, but then you say, no, I must do it like this because I watched on YouTube. And then you, instead of taking that 1 hour to just lose yourself and emotionally connect, even going to church, it's spiritual, right? You're supposed to just go there. The pastor is saying whatever he's saying. You have to listen and be in that zone. But then you go there again, you're on WhatsApp, you're checking your phone. Again, you're taking yourself back. By the time you leave the room, instead of gaining, you are still that person inside the healing place, but you're not healing.
No commitment to the process. Yes. No commitment.
So once you choose, let me say it starts by saying, I need help. If you say, I need help, then allow others to help you. They are professionals, they take years of study and there's experience as well. And then you reach to someone like that and then you're pushing them away. You're just going to carry that burden forever, even though you are in a place of healing.
And I love what you're talking about listening, because I think that's such a core element of healing, right? And listening, as you said, like as opposed to a goal of I need to achieve something. Listening can be, I always talk about, intentions versus goals. And I think listening is just that intention of I wish to be present, I wish to listen, to be aware. I can get on my mat a million times and you can do a million down dogs in your life, but it's also how am I willing to be the student of my body, right? How am I willing to let my body be my spirit and my soul's teacher, so that whenever I approach my mat, I'm approaching it with a sense of wanting to learn. Learning is what also gives us that satisfaction of I'm in growth, I'm in development, I'm in evolvement, right? And in Sanskrit, there's a concept called svadhyaya, which is basically self-study. And I think any form of movement is coming back to that anchoring of like, how much more can I learn from myself? Like, what do I need as a bio-individual person and being? What do I need to feed my soul? Right? What do I need? What can I understand that that comes from a space of listening?
Yes.
Rather than
I'd
anticipating a goal, because you're blocking yourself out from the infinite possibilities that are there to facilitate in the healing process of the medicine.
True.
You know, the more, what I'm picking up a lot is this idea of immersion into, you know, the movement or into the healing process. And I want to throw it back, maybe even to Paula, because we are also exploring the idea of Southern African dance, like ritual or celebration, celebration type movement. Because, you know, as a people, there were all these, you know, dances or rituals that were created to assist with healing in different ways, shapes, and forms. And we've lost so much of that for the reasons we will not speak of today. But a lot of that capacity to collectively heal through participation in those rituals has been lost. I mean, even if you go to rural areas now, there are very few ceremonies that involve the whole community, you know, participating in a traditional dance that has to do with healing, or that has to do with, you know, inciting joy or happiness or expressing sorrow or grief, because they weren't always just to celebrate. You know, there were some ritual dances which were, you know, meant for, you know, expressing all the anger you felt for the last 2 weeks, or, you know, something like that, right? So, you know, even as MutiARTS, we want to look a lot at Vimboza, which is a healing dance of the Tumbuka people in Malawi. And I want to, you know, throw this question to Paula and say, how much of indigenous healing movement still exists within, you know, the context of our communities here in Southern Africa, starting with, you know, the perspective of being in Malawi?
So firstly, I think it's a very broad, it seems like it's a simple, straightforward question, but it's a very broad question because a lot of it deals with spirituality. And I'm a Christian myself as well, but I am aware that there are certain, I mean, if you look at the mbira, for example, the mbira ritual, which deals with communicating with your ancestors, or pleasing or giving a gift to your ancestors. And, you know, the concept of that blessings comes with pleasing your ancestors, and blessings could also be health, for example, to have good health. And even if you go back into former biblical times, you would see people would do things like the rain dance or the fertility dance, or there were certain rituals of saying that, you know, let's heal the land, and by healing the land we can do a certain performance for whichever god that they would believe in, for example. But even apart from that, you see that in the Christian aspect that we deal with music, and like they were singing and dancing. It's something that's always quoted even in the Christian Bible, of they were singing and dancing as the king came, or as they had a party, or there's some type of a melody, or I don't know if you understand my concept of that. Music and dance is something that has always been integral, regardless of whichever time frame you're looking at, or whichever culture that you're looking at. And specifically, the reason I say this is because even when it comes to aspects of Christianity and African ritual dancing, there's this understanding that apparently Christianity only came to Africa around the 1600s. But I often quote to say that, well, the first 5 books of the Bible was written by Moses. And Moses, in fact, was an Egyptian, and Moses' wife was an Ethiopian. And even if you go into ethnological studies, you will find that even Southern Africans actually came from the Horn of Africa, which is around the Ethiopian region. So I think what we understand as so-called indigenous Southern African music dancing, I wouldn't say it's something that necessarily just evolved from the South, if that makes sense. I think, yes, of course, it has been socialized by the South because of things like surroundings. So that's why our music instruments are more lighter, because we had a more nomadic lifestyle, if I can put it as such. But in terms of where these type of movements, the instruments, the spirituality attached to it, it has a very long and multifaceted history. And with that obviously comes spirituality, and spirituality obviously equals, then in this case, also healing. Does that make sense? Through blessings.
Thank you so much. I was saying that I was just wondering if there's something Nunga wants to add to what you've just mentioned there.
Hiya. When we look at music, when I look at mental health as a whole, right, as a clinical counselor, I focus on the element of, you know, all the dimensions where you're looking at spirituality, you're looking at the physical aspect, you're looking at the psychological element of each of us, and the spiritual element. And a lot of the time we tend not to combine all these things together to be able to maintain that that balance. But what I love is how Africans and our traditions and our cultural dances have always had all these things combined in them, unknowingly being able to balance our mental health, unknowingly within community, celebrating our spirituality, celebrating us as a people, you know, has helped that balance. Now, as time has gone by, you find that there's less and less and less of that. So you're finding we're becoming more individualistic and we're not expressing ourselves through the normal platforms that we used to in our communities. So that is also bringing a little bit of a major downfall on our mental health. But you find that that's why we still, at the end of the day, we still implement in a lot of the stuff we do, weddings, parties, dancing is like the major aspect of each and every one of these elements, and you find that we find so much joy in it. We find so much peace in it. We find ourselves drawn to movement all the time. That's why I tend to always input that in each of my routine as self-discipline, as an individual who's struggling to balance themselves out. Exercise, movement, and dance especially, and if anything, yoga. You know, finding yoga or Pilates. If people don't like yoga because of the spiritual element that comes with it, as a Christian, we hear those talks about yoga, but there's Pilates that comes in and really helps with that as well. So understanding your body better, if you're physically able to move, then you naturally feel good about yourself, you know, you naturally feel better. It boosts your self-esteem, it boosts your immunity, it boosts your capacity to remember things and to be more productive and more focused in life. So that's what I can say with regards to that. The sad thing is that we're not doing it as much as we used to and how we used to do it. So it'll be really interesting to see how we can start bringing up that element into it. Last year I held a mental health, I hosted a mental health arts, creative arts performance thing where we were expressing different elements of mental health through dance and through poetry, you know, and we found that people were very drawn to it, and their response and their reaction is like, why don't we have more of this happening? Why don't we have more expressive arts, body movement, where most of us are able to gauge and understand better than reading books, you know, because for us as Africans, we're looking at dance as a way to express ourselves. So if we're able to bring this information that we have about mental health, how discipline is important, and put that all into movement, and I feel that we would be able to actually reach out to a wider base of people across Africa, whether you're illiterate or literate, everybody will be able to get it through that. Thank you.
Something was said that I find interesting is this idea of people want to participate in, you know, different forms of movement, but we attach so much taboo to it. And so you can't have it both ways, right? So if we start with, you know, yoga practice, for example, people, you know, from a different spiritual perspective, we've had this problem even as an organization at Tamba Africa, where we've, you know, asked someone to come in and, you know, do like a light session. And then we've had people say, oh, I can't participate because I'm a Christian. And I'm like, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing here, you know? And on the flip side, if you look at indigenous African dances, people will say, oh, I can't participate in that because it's, you know, dark arts, it's related to a negative version of spirituality, whether it's, I don't know what the English terminology of it is, and I don't want to assume, but you know, the sort of thing where you get demon, you know, like these evoked or exactly activations coming about. So you want to have the healing, but you attach so much stigma and negativity to it. So how do you, where's the compromise then? Because you don't have to, you know, subscribe to everything that comes with a, you know, living a certain lifestyle to do yoga, and vice versa. I don't have to completely like give into traditional medicine to participate in a dance.
I think what's really interesting is that, you know, innately we are all made to move as human beings, and we were made to move as a form of healing. Like the innate, the healing is within us, the medicine is within us, whichever kind of way that we move. And traditionally, I mean, if you're looking at the foundational, the birth of yoga as a healing practice, or the birth of traditional dance, and that dance will be so different all around the world. You know, it's almost an offer. It's this act of service to say, I'm healing myself, I'm giving of myself. And it's also a sense of togetherness, right? Because when I heal, I'm not just healing myself, I'm healing my lineages. I'm healing, I'm emanating a light that is also going to transmute into the collective consciousness. So I think it's also just that element of like now, because we've been so ego-ridden, and obviously we've got access to so much information. And so again, coming back to this like space of like comparison, you know, we've actually forgotten about the essence of what movement is, and we've attached so much kind of, help me with the word, we've just attached so much to what other people think, right? As opposed to like, how am I doing this for myself and for collective consciousness to heal? So yeah, just coming back to the same kind of self-study of like what works for me. How can I be open? Like even if I go into yoga practice, you know, some people enter it with an idea of, I need the spiritual side of it. I need it for my physical healing. I need it to get my mind more balanced. So I think just coming back to that innate medicine that we have movement in ourselves. And that's something that we have to remember in whatever way that we move.
Yeah.
We're made to move.
Yeah, I think tapping into that made to move. We forget that for years, all we ever did was move. We walked to everywhere. We went hunting. We grew our own food. So we were constantly moving. And if you compare health from back then to now, obviously our health has deteriorated awfully. So I think people should move, but in whatever way they feel comfortable to move. So if you feel like yoga is not your cup of tea, find something else. But the key just being to have, I think doctors or research recommends 30 minutes of movement daily. And if, I think if people commit to moving 30 minutes daily, improvements.
And I think it's also so much about, we talk about healing, we talk about medicine, we talk about healing, and a lot of the focus becomes or comes on that shadow work. You know, I have to go into the deep dark spaces to go through healing, but I've got a very different approach in the way that, again, coming back to movement, what is going to bring me joy, right? Because all forms of movement are healing. So what is actually innately in my soul when I come back to my intuition? How do I move? How do I heal from a space of joy? If I hate walking, you know, find another form of movement. If I'm not feeling connected to yoga, I'm not feeling connected to the gym, there's also the setting. Do I want to be outside in nature? So I feel safer being in a more kind of collective group environment in the gym. You know, where do I receive joy?
Just to add on to that is when you like still have a choice to walk or you do yoga or what, you still have free will. But there comes a time where you now have to have forced movement when you have sort of gained a lot of weight and you are at the age of dying or staying alive, and the doctors are saying you have to move or you're dying. You have to eat certain foods. You have to do this. So you sort of lose that willingness or choice, let me say. So it's better to start moving when you still have a choice. When you can still do yoga, you can still do. Come on, there are people that are disabled and they have always
They're
seen,
active.
yeah, they are
Yes,
active. I've seen videos of people that are training upper bodies and they don't have legs, but you have everything and you're just choosing not to move. Yeah, it comes to choices that can damage you in the long run. So movement can be a must, I think.
I think a lot of people are very fearful of being in their bodies, because especially with, say, Western medicine nowadays, all the answers of healing are outside within a doctor, within the expert, within someone who knows better than myself. And you forget that a lot of the healing it's all within you. Right. So yeah, it's again, I'm just coming back to that remembrance of that I'm my own healer and I have this body, and essentially why do I want to be healthy and happy? To let this life force energy move through me freely, to be of service. When I have a healthy body, I can be of service. I can be in my highest dharma. I can be in my highest state of consciousness, and in my highest I can give of my highest self to the world.
Yeah, there are a lot of diseases that can be cured with movement. Diabetes, you can cure heart diseases, you can cure varicose veins. You can actually help yourself to go through a natural labor for the women that are pregnant. There's a lot, and you can also fight depression. You can also fight, there are people that struggle with drugs and stuff. You can fight through movement. Sometimes, let me not just say movement, sometimes through experience with clients, there's a time where I'm training someone and I just can't figure out why we're not connecting and why the person is not improving as I'm going with them. Then I just sit back a bit and I just try to see how I can help them. And then a lot of times I've found that people are sort of lonely, even though they're around people. They can't find people to talk to. So sometimes talking to someone can be healing. And some people just find healing in just sitting down, just having that moment alone. No kids, no family, no what, just me and them. So I've had sessions like that where we just sit and talk, because that I know I'm helping that person, even though I know I'm supposed to be squatting and but there's no point of pushing the person when they're trying to heal, say from a loss of a loved one. Then I'm saying, okay, 10 jumping jacks is not going to help. Maybe just letting them speak, just speak their heart out. You'd find that by the end of that session, the person is relieved, and we through that peak where we trying to push, but we're not going anywhere. So maybe finding a person to talk to can be healing.
So I guess if I'm bringing it all back together, for those of you who expected us to be, jumping around and showing you some moves, I apologize. Because I think it can be misleading sometimes. And you've all actually touched on it a little bit, that movement is not necessarily equating to physical exertion to the max. Sometimes it's the little things. Even when you're sitting and speaking, it's that energy moving between two people. It's not necessarily your bodies, but it's your energies moving. And when you are, engaging in physical activity, then it's another kind of movement as well. So thank you guys so much for
opening up the idea of movement from being not just about physicality, but also a sense of energy and spirituality, and movement being a holistic concept and not just what you can materialize with your body. So I'm really, really grateful. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Paula and Linda as well. If this is your first time joining our MutiARTS Colloquium, be sure to go back and look at our expressive medicine and rhythmic medicine sessions as well. It will really tie the whole conversation together nicely. If you have been following the series, thank you so much. We appreciate your support. The feedback has been amazing, and it's really inspired us to think more about how we can contribute in the future, in the near future, to the conversation of healing through the arts, both from a holistic and global perspective, but also from an indigenous Southern African perspective as well. So thank you so much for joining the MutiARTS Colloquium. Be sure to follow Tamba Africa on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. And we'd also like to thank the Ant Adaptation Fund for making this all possible. So we hopefully will see you soon, but be sure to check out every other video we have on MutiARTS, and take care.